Hey guys, tonight we slip into a version of history that never quite happened, but almost did. You're stepping into thick leather boots, wrapped in a worn wool cloak, trudging beside tens of thousands of soldiers who don't know they're about to rewrite everything. It's 1812, but not the one you know. There's no frozen retreat. No skeletal horses sinking in icy rivers. No soldiers gnawing on candle wax to survive the Russian winter. In this alternate history, Napoleon wins. He conquers Russia. It starts differently from the very beginning. The clouds still gather. The roads still vanish beneath snow. But this time, the frost waits just a little longer. You march under a dull, metallic sky, but the cold is only biting, not deadly. The Grand Army, swollen to nearly 500,000 men, crosses the Niemen River and just keeps going. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? What's your local time right now? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The invasion begins in early summer, like before. But here's the twist. The rains come late. The mud doesn't drown the wagons. The roads stay firm longer. And the endless logistics chain, ox carts, horses, Polish wagons, even camel trains, yes, actual camels, moves forward with groans and groggy determination. You're on the edge of Lithuania, wiping sweat from your brow, not frost from your beard. By the time you reach Smolensk, you're tired but alive. Food is low, but not gone. The Russian army tries to learn Napoleon deeper, but he isn't desperate this time. He has time. He sends scouts, reroutes his forces with eerie calm, and finds a way to encircle the city with artillery. Boom. 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 The walls of Smolensk tremble like a kettle ready to scream. But the city doesn't burn. It surrenders. Historians still argue whether the governor was bribed, broken, or just bored of war. Inside, French officers commandeer merchant houses, requisition vodka, and write letters home boasting of light resistance and open roads. A general nicknamed the Locust drafts proclamations offering peace, bread, and French cheese. The locals squint suspiciously but take the bread. The cheese, not so much. You sleep one night on the floor of a looted manor. A golden frame dangles crookedly above your head. It holds a painting of a noblewoman who looks like she'd rather be somewhere else. Same. 2 days later you wake to trumpets. The army is moving. The final push begins. And for once, just once, Russia forgets to light the match. In this new history, Moscow does not burn. There is no firestorm, no orange glow staining the sky like Judgment Day. Instead, you arrive to silence. Churches shuttered. Streets empty. Horses clip-clop through boulevards without a single voice echoing from a window. But then, movement. White-gloved envoys approach beneath a makeshift truce flag. The city has been abandoned by the Tsar and handed over by the clergy and remaining boyars. There are conditions, naturally. The churches stay untouched. The granaries unpillaged. The nobles protected. Napoleon agrees. He doesn't want to scorch the earth. He wants to rule it. You enter Moscow like a ghost. The city breathes around you, gingerbread-colored domes, onion-shaped towers, flaking palaces. You hear a rooster. You hear bells. You sleep that night in the ballroom of a minor prince's estate. Beneath your boots, frozen in a moment of silence, the last dance lingers, scuffed parquet floors, wilting garlands, a dropped glove. You dream of mirrors. Outside, Russian informants whisper of resistance. But it's scattered. Leaderless. Most of the Tsar's court has vanished eastward. And the army? Disintegrated or deserting. You overhear officers joking about making Moscow the second Paris. There's talk of renaming squares, installing gas lamps, converting bathhouses into cafes. You sip wine from a silver goblet you definitely didn't buy. Then, as dusk falls, something odd happens. A priest approaches camp. He brings a gift, a loaf of bread baked in the shape of France. He bows low and says something about peace. You're not sure if it's a trap or a bribe. Doesn't matter. The bread's warm. You eat it anyway. That night, the stars are weirdly clear. You count them like coins, trying to find Orion's belt, but all you find is the chill returning. Winter is coming, but not fast enough to save Russia. You wake up to the scent of boiled onions and burned butter. The kitchens of Moscow, at least the ones still staffed, have begun cooking again, nervously feeding the victors. Someone passes you a bowl of soup. It's thin, but it's hot. You sip it slowly, sitting on a marble step outside the estate-turned-barracks, and watch Napoleon's empire stretch like a shadow across the Russian plain. The French army, once starving and freezing in your history books, now lumbers confidently east. With Moscow in hand and the Tsar in flight, Napoleon doesn't retreat. He expands. You march again. South and east. Across wheat fields that roll like ocean swells, across muddy roads dotted with skeleton windmills, past villages that once burned but now just smolder with resignation. The Grand Army is thinning, some to illness, some to desertion, some simply lost, but it's still functional. Still sharp. You meet the Dnieper River on a morning slick with frost. Not killer frost, not yet, but enough to numb your fingers and make the rains slippery. Engineers build pontoon bridges. You help carry a beam and slip into the icy shallows, socks soaked through. No one laughs. It's just too cold for jokes. As the army moves, the landscape changes. Gone are the onion domes of Moscow. Now you see wooden churches with low, slanted roofs, their crosses crooked like tired scarecrows. In one village, an old woman tries to bless the soldiers as they pass, waving a dried herb bundle like it might actually help. She looks at you and spits. You're not sure if it's a curse or a prayer. You keep walking. Each step sinks a little deeper into the mud, but not disastrously so. The army's learned. You now travel in staggered formations, supply wagons rerouted along firmer paths, and some genius, probably Polish, has hired local guides. They're paid in silver rubles and French cigarettes. In a town called Kaluga, you pass a blacksmith with one hand. He's hammering stubbornly with his elbow, teeth clenched, his forge barely alive. He doesn't look up. His daughter does. She's selling baked apples and cold tea to soldiers who pay in buttons, earrings, even IOUs. You give her a coin. She gives you 2 apples and a look you don't know how to translate. By now, it's October. Leaves crisp underfoot. The birches look like skeletons. And Napoleon? He's still not satisfied. He's pushing south, toward Tula, toward the armories. He wants to break the Russian war machine, not just take its capital, but smash its factories, its powder, its future. Historians still argue whether this was brilliance or madness. But in this version of reality, he has the momentum. You enter a town where the walls are stained with whitewash and desperation. The church bells ring, but not for Mass. They ring because French cannons have been spotted on the horizon. You help dig trenches. You help fill sandbags. You are exhausted. But so are the Russians. They've been retreating for months. Their lines are thin. Their officers exhausted. Their food supplies scattered, stolen, burned, mismanaged. And the infamous scorched earth policy? It just didn't get far enough east. Now the fire has met rain. The villages stand empty, yes, but intact. And so the French feed themselves. One soldier, Pierre, finds a whole barrel of pickled herring. Another steals a goat. Someone even finds vodka hidden in a false wall behind a portrait of St. Nicholas. That night, the firelight flickers on your tent as songs drift upward into the pine trees. A general announces victory at Maloroslavets, where in the original timeline the French failed to advance further south. But here? They crush the defenders and keep moving. The Russians, disorganized and leaderless, scatter. The road is open. You walk beneath banners now. Not just French, but Polish, Italian, Saxon. This is no longer an invasion force. This is an occupation. Some peasants begin calling Napoleon Batyushka, a strange and awkward term of reluctant reverence. Others carve strange symbols into trees. A few villages display portraits of the emperor, hastily drawn and oddly flattering. One has him holding a loaf of bread in a tiny Orthodox church. You pass soldiers dragging a broken sleigh across gravel. It's symbolic in a way. This is what should have happened to all of you. Cold, broken, retreating. But instead you press forward. One evening, snowflakes finally begin to fall. Slow, hesitant, unsure if they've been invited. You hold out your hand and catch one on your glove. It melts instantly. Not cold enough yet. A local trader tells you the Tsar is hiding near Kazan. That he's building an army from scraps. But the rumor feels thin. You picture Alexander sitting alone in a smoky lodge, staring into a fire, wondering where it all went wrong. Another rumor says he's already fled to Siberia. Another says he's dead. Another says he's disguised himself as a monk and lives among the peasants. Historians still argue over which tale was closest to the truth. Meanwhile, Napoleon has taken over the palaces. You hear that he's living in the Kremlin, dictating new laws through translators, introducing French street names, reorganizing Russian currency, and sipping imported Burgundy in a fur robe. The French officers have begun hosting dinners again, serving goose with juniper, pickled pears, and strange pastries filled with cabbage. You're invited once. You spend the evening half asleep beside a carved lion statue, listening to someone recite Molière in Russian. And you wonder, what next? Russia has no capital. Its army is fractured. The emperor controls more land than any Roman ever dreamed of. But winter is still coming. The real question is, how long can this hold? You climb into your blanket that night, staring up at a canvas tent, your breath fighting the air. A rat scurries across the floor. You name him Eugene and give him a piece of apple. Snow begins to fall in earnest. Finally, soft, relentless, unbothered by conquest. Snow now carpets everything. Not in a blizzardy, apocalyptic way, just soft, steady, annoying. You wake up each morning with frost edging your blanket and a crust of ice forming on the lip of your water canteen. It's not the destroy your army kind of cold. Not yet. Just the kind that seeps in behind your ribs and makes you miss fireplaces you've never even sat near. But you're in Moscow again. The army rotates in waves between the front and the capital, like a giant washing machine sloshing men and muskets back and forth. You've been lucky. Your unit got a brief posting inside the city. And what a city it's become. Moscow didn't burn. Instead, it bowed. And now it glitters. Sort of. French tricolor flags drape awkwardly over Orthodox archways. Imperial eagles hang above shop fronts, half wilted in the snow. A bakery has changed its name from Bread of Saints to Le Pain de Gloire, the bread of glory. They still sell black rye loaves, just wrapped in blue paper and charged double. Noble estates, once silent and shuttered, are now hosting salons. You're posted near one in the Arbat district, and you often see gaslights flickering through the fogged windows while violin music leaks into the cold. You hear things. That Countess Shuvlova now speaks French even in her sleep. That her cousin has married a French officer, out of love or fear, no one's sure. That several high-ranking boyars now wear bicorn hats. Badly. Inside those halls, the old Russian aristocracy sips Bordeaux and nibbles croissants. They say merci with an accent thick enough to butter. But they're smiling. At least on the surface. You stand guard outside one of those parties. Your breath puffs into the night like ghostly laundry. A footman offers you warm cider. You take it. Why not? Historians still argue whether the Russian nobility truly accepted the occupation, or just played along long enough to survive it. The French generals certainly believed it. Napoleon was already drafting plans to install a puppet Duma. Streets were being renamed after French heroes. One was called Rue de Smolensk. Another, Rue de l'Empereur. A few soldiers started calling Moscow Napoleonigrad. That didn't catch on. But the locals weren't all passive. You pass a cathedral one morning and find its doors sealed with wax and garlands. The priest has vanished. Some say he fled. Others say he was arrested for blessing bread with the words, "May France rot like last year's beetroot." Another day, you see a nobleman being dragged away by the gendarmerie. He tried to duel a French officer for calling Russian poetry too muddy. Still, for now, it's mostly quiet. Napoleon knows how to keep an occupied city from boiling over. Bread rations double. Vodka flows, though controlled. Public executions? Rare. Spies? Everywhere. You meet one, though you don't realize it at first. A woman selling candied nuts at a street corner looks too clean for winter. She always stands near French patrols. And she always listens more than she sells. You buy a bag from her once. She smiles. Says something in perfect French. And winks. You don't ask questions. In another part of the city, you wander through a repurposed monastery now functioning as a French administrative building. Inside, rooms are full of desks, papers, shouting bureaucrats. Maps everywhere. Red pins creeping east. Blue pins holding the roads. You pass one map and trace the route from Paris to Moscow with your finger. It feels absurd. Like walking from one planet to another. And now it's real. You bump into a translator, young, nervous, from Warsaw. He says, "Did you hear? The Tsar wrote a letter. Asked for terms?" That night, the rumor spreads like candlelight in dry rafters. The Tsar, far to the east, wants to talk. But Napoleon isn't interested in talk. He wants submission. So instead of responding, he throws a ball. Literally. A winter masquerade inside the Kremlin palace. You're posted near the main staircase. Snow is swept from guests' coats like dandruff. You see generals in gold thread coats, duchesses in repurposed gowns, and a few Russians wearing expressions that say, "We're pretending, but don't forget." Someone plays a harp. Someone else juggles apples. A drunk French officer recites Voltaire while dancing with a wax dummy wearing a bear pelt. It's all very cultured. Very unstable. Napoleon arrives late. Dressed in a long white coat. He looks pale. Tired. Maybe even bored. He clinks a glass and gives a speech. You can't hear it. But the room goes silent. Then erupts in applause. You catch a few words. Something about unity, glory, and eternal order. Later, you find out he's declared himself protector of the Russian realm. Not Tsar yet, but it's close. You start to wonder what your uniform means now. Are you an invader? An enforcer? Or just a guy who's walked too far to turn around? The weeks go by. Snow deepens. Pipes freeze. But the streets stay clear. French engineers lay planks, dig ditches, manage the weather like stubborn tailors trying to hem a hurricane. Moscow, for now, functions. Theaters reopen. A new opera premieres, The Winter Sun of Austerlitz. Critics say it's ambitious. You sneak in through the back one night and fall asleep before the second act. One morning, you hear a child laugh in the street. She's chasing a dog through the snow. The dog wears a French cockade on its collar. The child wears mittens with the Russian double eagle. Neither cares. You watch her until she disappears into the fog. And for just a moment you think, maybe this could work. Maybe peace, even uneasy peace, can stretch across this vast, frozen empire. But then you hear distant thunder, not from the sky, but from the east. New troops. Not French. Not Allied. Something stirring. The quiet can't last forever. You're posted at the edge of the city now, where Moscow unravels into misty woods and frozen cabbage fields. The wind here has teeth, and it bites harder each day. The empire feels thinner this far from Napoleon's fireside salons. Out here, uniforms are patched, boots leak, and your musket has started clicking in the cold like an old man's knees. Still, you hold the line. Because somewhere beyond these pines, the Russian nobility watches. The court isn't dead. It's displaced. In a strange twist, much of Russia's aristocracy didn't flee to Siberia, as you might expect. They pivoted. Some swore loyalty. Others disappeared into country estates, pretending to be apolitical philosophers. And some stayed in Moscow, walking a razor's edge between defiance and compliance. You're assigned to guard the halls of the newly repurposed House of Princes, where surviving nobles are invited to meet and collaborate with the French administration. It's more of a velvet trap than a court, and everyone knows it. Inside, it's all chandeliers and tension. You spot Duke Vorontsov, whose face looks like a crumpled newspaper. He bows stiffly to a French general, then immediately mutters something in angry Old Church Slavonic under his breath. Countess Galitzina hosts literary salons once a week, where people pretend to discuss Molière but really exchange coded gossip. You're stationed outside her parlor once. Through the door, you hear the clink of teacups and a woman saying, "Even wolves smile before they bite." That same week, someone paints a rooster in French blue on the cathedral wall. It's subtle, clever. A rooster is France's symbol. But in Russia, it's also a herald of fire. A warning. Historians still argue over what that act meant. Mockery? Surrender? Prophecy? You lean against your musket unsure. Back inside, the nobles do what nobles always do, adapt. You see French and Russian coats hanging side by side on gilded hooks. You see fashion trends mutate, epaulettes sewn onto fur cloaks, sabers hung next to icon pendants. There's even a new kind of hat, wide-brimmed with a fur lining, they're calling le serralon. It's hideous. Everyone wants one. A few nobles genuinely warm to the French. There's talk of Enlightenment ideals, of legal reforms, of maybe abolishing serfdom. Eventually, you hear whispers about land redistribution, about standardizing currency, about education. One very tall count proposes building a lycée for noble boys, modeled on the Parisian ones. A French officer jokes, let's start by teaching them to bathe." The count does not laugh. You're dismissed before the tension boils over. Outside, a man approaches you in the snow and offers you a carved icon of St. George. Says it'll protect you. His beard is full of frost and secrets. You give him a coin. He disappears before you can ask why St. George's face looks vaguely like Napoleon's. Not far from there, the Russian clergy is in quiet turmoil. Napoleon has promised not to interfere with the church, but promises from emperors come wrapped in footnotes. A French envoy recently visited the Patriarchate to discuss cooperation. He left with 2 icons, 3 crates of wine, and several unsettling questions about Latin liturgy. The clergy holds emergency councils, candles burning low as they debate whether France is a punishment or a test. You peek into one of these gatherings during a patrol shift and see old men in golden robes arguing over a Bible so worn it looks like it's been used to plug leaks. You don't speak Church Slavonic, but the word, Antichrist, comes up more than once. A fringe bishop named Iosif starts preaching that Napoleon is the fulfillment of the second trumpet. He's quickly reassigned to a monastery far, far north. Probably for the best. The Orthodox faith is strong here. But so is hunger. and fear. A priest trades his vestments for a French officer's cloak after 3 nights without food. When he returns to his village, they don't recognize him. Or they pretend not to. He walks with a limp and an accent now. Meanwhile, in the imperial court of what remains, in Kazan or Astrakhan, no one's quite sure. The Tsar is reportedly gathering advisors. Still wearing full regalia, still signing decrees that no one enforces. One French commander says, "Alexander rules a kingdom of snowflakes." Another warns, "Snow becomes rivers, eventually." You don't know what to believe. All you know is that every day your orders change. One week you're patrolling a noble estate turned schoolhouse. The next, you're escorting a convoy of vodka barrels headed to supply the southern garrisons. You pass villages where old women still make the sign of the cross when they see your uniform. You pass young boys who shout Bonaparte, like it's a spell. You pass a freshly built monument in the town square, a marble arch crowned with a gilded N, flanked by lions that look suspiciously like they were repurposed from an old Romanov sculpture. The inscription reads, "To peace through order." Someone has scratched a second line beneath it, barely visible in the frost. To order through fear. You sit on a bench beneath it one day, gnawing on frozen bread, and think about how many uniforms you've worn in your life. Then, from down the road, you hear laughter. Children are ice skating on the river, using sticks and scraps of barrel metal for blades. One falls. He gets up, laughing, his cheeks red, his nose dripping. His older sister calls to him in French. Then Russian. Then both at once. It's strange, but for a moment, just a moment, it feels like this might be normal someday. But behind you, back in the House of Princes, a new petition is being signed. Some of the nobility want Napoleon to crown himself Tsar of the West. Others argue he should marry into the Romanov bloodline. A third group just wants their estates back. You're not sure which group is more dangerous. You're stationed now on the edge of what used to be the Russian Empire. Or maybe it still is the Russian Empire. It just doesn't know who's in charge anymore. Out east, far past Moscow, far beyond the snowdrifts and groaning birch forests, Alexander Pavlovich, Tsar, exiled monarch, devout Orthodox Christian, anxious philosopher, is still alive. Still writing letters. Still plotting something. You hear rumors in the wind. Not from French command, but from locals. From a tattered courier who says he used to serve the Tsar. From a milkmaid whose brother is part of a strange militia forming in the east. From a half-mad priest who wanders from village to village declaring that the eagle has gone silent, but not dead. The Tsar, they say, is not done. You imagine him sitting in a cramped provincial hall somewhere beyond the Volga River, wrapped in furs, candlelight flickering on his pale, regal face. He's writing something, a speech, perhaps, or a declaration. His generals are fewer now. His army in rags. But he still has legitimacy. Napoleon might rule the cities, but Alexander still rules the myth. Historians still argue whether this resistance was organized or imagined. Was there a genuine imperial shadow court? Or was it a noble fantasy kept alive by desperate loyalists? You don't know. You just know that you've been ordered to reinforce positions around Vladimir, which now functions as the unofficial border between occupied Russia and the part still pretending to breathe free. It's tense. Your unit builds small forts from frozen earth and scavenged beams. You spend your days patrolling along frozen rivers, where wolves walk more confidently than men. You find one gnawing on a boot once. The leg is gone. You look away. One afternoon you hear drums. Not French. Not Russian either. It's a ragged procession, old Cossack riders with fur hats and mismatched boots, their sabers tied with red ribbon, their horses snorting plumes of steam. They're singing. Off-key. Something defiant. Something sharp. They're not attacking. Not today. Just reminding everyone they exist. Later, you ask a local what the ribbons mean. She whispers, "They ride for the old blood." The French officers start fidgeting. Reinforcements are slow. Supplies are thinner now. The snow has stopped falling, but the cold has sharpened. Fingers crack, lips bleed, boots split. But back in Moscow, the salons are still warm. You hear that Napoleon has sent new envoys south, east, even toward China. He wants recognition, trade, legitimacy. He's already planning a new code of law, Le Code Muscovite. You wonder if anyone's told the people living in the countryside. Meanwhile, your patrol grows stranger. You visit towns that pretend the war never happened. Priests offer blessings to whoever wins. Local magistrates write laws in both languages. Schoolteachers teach arithmetic using examples like, "If you have 3 tsars and 1 emperor, how many rulers do you have?" No one knows the answer. In one village, you find a small crowd gathered around a man standing on a barrel. He's holding a chicken in one hand and shouting in Russian, French, and Latin. He declares himself the true heir to both thrones. His beard is frozen solid. A child throws a potato at him. That night, you share a cabin with 2 French officers and a Polish translator. The translator says, "We've won too much." One officer replies, "No such thing." The other adds, "Wait until we have to hold it." And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Victory is one thing. Control is another. Because even now, whispers of the Tsar drift through the trees like smoke. And you realize, you've never seen him. Not really. Only heard stories. Seen portraits. You start to wonder if he's even real anymore. One night, you're stationed at a watchtower near a frozen river. The wind howls through the gaps in the beams. You wrap yourself tighter in your coat and stare into the trees. A flicker of movement. A glint of something metallic. A horse's whinny. Then silence. You don't report it. You just note it. Like a page torn from someone else's story. The next day, your commander briefs you. Intelligence suggests Alexander is rallying the Kazan governors. Trying to convince the Tatars to join him. Promising autonomy. You blink. That's ambitious. Another officer scoffs. The Eastern Steppe hasn't followed Moscow in 100 years. Then maybe, someone mutters, they'll follow not Moscow. You don't laugh. Because slowly, very slowly, the map begins to split. Not by borders, but by loyalty. Napoleon controls roads, cities, fortresses. He builds things. Bridges. Courts. Tax bureaus. He governs. But Alexander floats like a myth, carried on prayer and rumor. A symbol. A maybe. And maybe that's more dangerous. You pass a chapel where someone scratched a prayer into the wall. God protect the Tsar. Or failing that, confuse our enemies. Later, in another village, a boy draws in the snow with a stick. He sketches 2 figures, one tall and crowned, the other short and stout with a hand tucked into his coat. He labels them Tsar, Emperor. Then he draws a 3rd figure. Just a question mark. You stare at it a long time. By the time spring arrives, not a gentle Parisian spring but a slushy, half-frozen mess of dripping roofs and sour earth, the rest of Europe has already begun to tremble. News travels slowly here, limping along frozen rivers and rutted postal roads. But even so, word gets through. Napoleon has conquered Russia. Not just crossed into it. Not just sacked a city or 2. No, this time, he's still there, still sitting in Moscow, still sending orders from the Kremlin's gold-tipped towers like he owns the place. Because, well, he kind of does. The ripple effect is instant. You hear about it first from a courier riding hard from Vienna, his boots crusted with salt and snow. He delivers 3 letters, shivers by your fire, and says in a hollow voice, "Austria is reconsidering things." Of course they are. You remember, Austria's already been beaten. Twice. Their pride is a stitched-up balloon at this point. Their loyalty? Elastic. Historians still argue whether this moment, the quiet before Austria blinked, was the point where the rest of Europe gave up trying to contain Napoleon, or if it was when they began to really fear him. And fear, as you're learning, is a kind of glue. Across the continent, alliances don't just shift, they melt, drip, slide. Prussia sends mixed signals. One general marches troops to the border, another sends wine to the French consulate. Spain, still bleeding from its long war with the Emperor, falls suspiciously silent. Britain grinds its teeth from across the sea, clutching maps that now feel like outdated fantasy novels. And you? You're redeployed to Smolensk, now functioning as a crucial military administrative center. You arrive to find French flags fluttering from church spires, street names carved into stone in 2 languages, and a new kind of officer walking the streets, diplomats. Men in polished boots, gold-fringed jackets, and feathered hats. They talk too much and walk too little. They draft treaties like fortune-tellers reading tea leaves. You sit in a tavern one night, commandeered and renamed Le Café de la Victoire, and overhear 2 of them arguing in rapid, clipped French. If we form a confederation. No, better to absorb them piecemeal. But the logistics. France has logisticians, not magicians, Claude. You sip weak brandy and try not to laugh. Outside, soldiers from Bavaria and Naples dig post holes for new boundary markers. One afternoon, you're asked to escort a delegation of Polish nobles arriving from Warsaw. They're wearing tailored coats and suspicious smiles. One of them gives you a coin and asks if the Kremlin smells like garlic. You're not sure how to answer. Poland's a tricky beast in all this. They've always wanted independence. Napoleon once gave them hope, a duchy, a border, a flag. Now, with Russia broken open like a winter melon, some believe he'll finally grant them real sovereignty. You walk behind their carriage, listening to their voices rise and fall between languages. Polish, French, Russian, German. Europe is a stew now, bubbling but not yet boiling. In Smolensk, a general unveils a new proposal, a pan-European confederation, with France at the center, of course. It sounds like a dream. Or a trap. Meanwhile, down in Odessa, word arrives that French ships now patrol the Black Sea. Rumors say they've cut a deal with the Ottomans, trading, stability, for ports. In this version of reality, the Sultan sees opportunity instead of threat. And Persia? Persia watches. Carefully. You're handed a report one morning. Printed in elegant Cyrillic, then stamped with a wax seal bearing the Napoleonic eagle. It says, "Informal contact has been established with southern courts. Talks of silk for steel trade underway. No military tension at this time. No military tension. For now. But everyone's watching the eagle's wings." You walk the city at night, past shuttered bakeries and new consulates. The French language is everywhere now, on signs, in schools, even in lullabies. You hear a mother sing to her baby in a strange blend of Russian vowels and Parisian cadence. Dodo, Montserichka, face ton som du. It's charming. And a little terrifying. One afternoon, you attend a meeting, purely by accident, where French officers and Russian landowners argue over road construction. The topic: should we build west to east or north to south? One man yells, "There's no point building anything if we don't know which map we're using." Another bangs the table and says, "Use Napoleon's. It's the only one that matters now." You leave before they notice you. Later, you're posted outside the new Governor General's mansion. It used to be a merchant's house. Now it's full of velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, and maps of a world that might not exist yet. Inside, a meeting is underway. You catch a few words. Prussian diplomacy, Austrian silence, British blockade, Spanish insurgency. You imagine a chessboard stretching from Lisbon to Vladivostok. All of it watched by a single man with his hand tucked under his coat. Napoleon is building something big. But big things fall hard. You walk back to your bunk that night, exhausted, boots soaked, brandy bottle sloshing gently in your coat. A soldier from Naples offers you a dried figure. Says, "We'll be in India next." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "If we just keep walking." You lie in bed and think. If France rules everything, where does it end? Or maybe the better question is, who gets to say it's enough? You're back in Moscow again. Not as a soldier this time. Well, not entirely. You're still armed, still in uniform, but now your post is oddly quiet, a corner near a bookshop and a tailor who insists on measuring generals without ever touching them. And everything feels different. It's spring now, real spring. Not the muddy half-thaw, but actual sun. Tulips peek out along the boulevards. Pigeons coo on statues of French poets hastily installed where Orthodox saints once stood. You pass a small park where children play tag and argue in a blend of French and Russian. One of them runs past you yelling, "You be the emperor!" The others groan and shout, "No, you were him last time." That's where you realize the world has shifted. Not just politically, culturally. Because France isn't just occupying Russia anymore. It's redecorating it. Napoleon doesn't like half measures. If he conquers you, you don't just change flags, you change clothes, cut your hair differently, learn new verbs. And now, that transformation is blooming in the streets like wildflowers through cobblestones. French culture is seeping into the bones of this place. You walk past a bakery called Chez Katia, which sells baguettes and blinis side by side. The baker bows and says, "Bonjour, soldat," even though you know he used to curse the army under his breath 3 months ago. You see a sign advertising La Poésie billing, bilingual poetry night. French officers recite Baudelaire, while Russian students nervously follow with Pushkin. Someone plays a harp. Someone else mispronounces liberté. Nobody minds. You duck into a bookstore to warm your hands. The owner, a wiry woman with ink-stained fingers, grins and says, "We just got Voltaire." Again. She hands you a copy with a wink. "This one's been translated into 3 languages. None of them correct." She laughs like a woman who used to be afraid, and now just doesn't care. Historians still argue whether this cultural bloom was genuine admiration or survival instinct dressed in lace. You see both. In salons, nobles trade toast for Rousseau. In schools, Latin is out, French grammar drills are in. A new fashion emerges. Napoleonic minimalism meets Muscovite flair. Epaulettes paired with fox fur. Cravats with icon necklaces. The newspapers reflect it too. One is called L'Aube de Moscou, the Moscow Dawn. It publishes poems, war reports, and modern etiquette guides. One headline reads, 7 ways to host a salon without offending your occupier. The number 7 is spelled out. They're learning. The article advises. Always serve wine before vodka. Never mention winter unless complimenting French boots. Refer to the emperor as His Excellence, at least once every conversation. It's hilarious. It's unsettling. It's the new normal. You attend a theater performance, mandatory guard detail. The play is the tragedy of the double throne, a thinly veiled satire. One character named Cerulean fights a mirror version of himself. The audience claps politely. Someone mutters, "Too real." In a market you see strange hybrid foods. Buckwheat croissants. Pickled brie. Pelmeni filled with duck à l'orange. Your stomach is skeptical. Your mouth? Curious. Somewhere in all this, religion begins to bend too. In the heart of Moscow stands a small Orthodox chapel that now also hosts Latin Mass. It's unofficial. Quiet. A compromise. The priest there, Father Mikhail, is rumored to be a secret Bonapartist. He preaches peace and adaptation. His sermons blend parables with Enlightenment quotes. One Sunday, he says, "God speaks every language, but right now, he's using French." No one laughs. But no one walks out either. Another priest, an older one, sets up an open-air altar outside the city. He rings bells each morning and shouts prayers in Old Slavonic so loud that the birds flee. You hear he's been arrested 3 times, but they always release him. Too loud to kill, someone says. Meanwhile, among the younger generation, something new is forming. You overhear a group of students debating philosophy in the university courtyard. One quotes Rousseau. Another counters with the Bible. A third interrupts them both and says, "What if we're neither Russian nor French, just tired?" They all nod. Later, one of them sketches you as part of an art assignment. You pose under protest. The result, a pencil drawing titled, "Soldier with Fog Behind His Eyes." You're not sure if you're offended or flattered. You hang it in your barracks. At night you stroll the city, and it hums. Candles flicker behind embroidered curtains. Music wafts from open balconies. The air smells of tobacco, snow, and cinnamon. It feels like peace. But not quite. It's the kind of peace where people smile just a second too late. Where laughter lingers a beat too long. Where you know everyone is waiting for the other boot to drop. But it's wearing very nice leather and might not drop at all. You hear that Napoleon's wife, Marie-Louise, might visit Moscow. That he plans to make it the second capital of the empire. That one day, maybe, the emperor's heir will rule east of Paris. Someone jokes. They'll rename St. Petersburg to St. Bonaparte. Someone else responds. Too long. Call it Bonograd. Everyone groans. But you see it in their eyes. The idea is already growing roots. This is no longer just a war. It's a remodeling. The question is, what will be left when the scaffolding comes down? It's muddy again. Not the spring kind, but the churned-up, foot-sucking, despair-scented muck of peasant fields in late summer. You're miles from Moscow now, farther than you've been in months. No domes here. No operas. No croissants pretending to be culture. This is the underbelly. You've been reassigned to an eastern district, near Ryazan, where French administration is, extending order, to the countryside. The goal, supposedly, is to organize the peasantry under new laws, implement fair taxation, and teach modern farming techniques. The reality? You stand ankle-deep in goat droppings while an old woman waves a turnip at you and yells in a dialect you've never even heard. Welcome to the other half of the empire. Because while cities bloom with French theater and layered pastries, the villages still smell like boiled potatoes and old resentment. You pass through one settlement, no name on the map, just a smudge, and see children barefoot in puddles, horses with ribs showing, and peasants who look at your uniform like it's a contagious rash. They've heard stories. Some still think the Tsar will return. Others believe he's already dead. A few whisper that he turned into a bird and watches from the clouds. One babushka swears he appears to her in dreams and tells her when to plant her carrots. You don't argue. Instead, you do what you're told. French officers distribute pamphlets promising freedom from serfdom. The villagers take them with confusion, glance at the printed French, and use them to light cooking fires. Because here's the thing, serfdom wasn't just oppression. It was structure. Predictability. Now, no czar. No lord. No rules. Just new taxes, strange uniforms, and questions no one is answering. A peasant named Kirill invites you into his hut one evening. You're drenched, cold, and frankly too tired to refuse. Inside, it smells like straw, cabbage soup, and faint smoke. He serves you kvass and bread. Then he asks, very calmly, "Will the French give me back my cow?" You pause. He nods. The Russians took it during retreat. Now the French take the hay. You mutter something about requisitions and compensation. He laughs softly. Empire is always hungry. You sleep on the floor beside his oven. It's the warmest sleep you've had in weeks. The next morning, you wake to a chicken perched on your boot. You walk outside and see a crude shrine, twigs, ribbons, an icon. A child has drawn Napoleon's face beside a haloed saint. You're not sure whether it's praise or mockery. Historians still argue whether the rural poor viewed the French as liberators, invaders, or just another blizzard to survive. You meet a woman who claims to have 12 children and no husband. She tells you, "The Tsar gave us God. The French give us roads. I don't know which is more useful in mud." She spits, not in anger, just boredom. Then offers you beets. You accept. In one village, you see a schoolhouse painted blue and white. A banner reads a call to reform. Inside, a nervous teacher tries to teach subtraction in 2 languages. Trois pommes minus equals. The children blink. One starts crying. Another just eats their pencil. Progress. You help install a grain scale in another town. The peasants crowd around like it's a holy relic. One man says, "It weighs nothing but decides everything." You write that down. You're not sure why. In the evenings, French administrators drink wine and complain. "These people," one says, "they have no ambition. These people," another counters, "have survived every army that's ever passed through. That is ambition." You sit quietly, chewing black bread. Because the truth is, out here, power means little. You can't eat proclamations. You can't plow with reforms. And while the French build roads, the peasants dig caches. They hide grain in dry wells. They bury weapons in ovens. They carve czarist prayers into barn doors. One night, a torch goes missing. The next morning, a French officer finds the outline of a rooster burned into his doorframe. Again. The peasant symbol for fire. Again. You begin to suspect that the revolution is already simmering, but not in cities, not in speeches. It's in cabbages that disappear, in dogs that bark at the wrong moment, and looks exchanged behind your back. You walk through a field and step on something metallic. A musket. Wrapped in cloth. Hidden under leaves. You pick it up. Dust it off. And bury it again. Later that week, you escort a tax wagon through another nameless hamlet. As it leaves, a child tosses a rock at it. Not hard. Just enough. Everyone sees. No one reacts. It's starting. Not a war. Not yet. But something quieter. Slower. Peeling away. The empire has walls, uniforms, and symbols. But out here, it's got no roots. And the roots are watching. You're transferred again. This time to a quieter post, quiet in the way an old church is quiet before an earthquake. Your new assignment is spiritual. Literally. You're stationed near the Holy Trinity St. Sergius Lavra, one of the most sacred monasteries in Russia. It's an ancient fortress of stone and bells, onion domes blinking in the pale morning mist, frescoes so faded they look like bruises. But things have changed here too. The gates no longer open with reverence, they creak under bureaucracy. French officials now occupy a wing of the monastery. They've set up desks in the cloister halls, drawn lines on maps using golden rulers, and instructed monks to streamline their candle inventories. You don't know how to feel about it. One monk, old, stooped, wrapped in so many layers he looks like a walking haystack, offers you dried cherries and asks, "Did Christ have paperwork?" You say nothing. Because here, beneath the incense and echoing chants, the spiritual power of Russia still hums. Faintly. Like a fading radio signal. Napoleon promised the church autonomy. But promises don't hold weight when entire systems are collapsing and being reassembled in another language. Now the clergy must write sermons in French and Russian. Orthodox bishops attend meetings with French officials who call them Monsieur le Metropolitan. Crosses hang next to framed imperial decrees. The altar servers wear tricolor armbands. It's absurd. You walk the monastery grounds and see contradictions everywhere. Latin Bibles beside icons of St. Nicholas. A statue of Joan of Arc installed next to the sacred spring. Monks who bless French soldiers with trembling fingers, then kneel in secret and kiss the soil behind them. Historians still argue whether the church resisted or survived. Or both. In the cathedral, the singing remains untouched. You hear it one evening, deep, slow, sorrowful chants rising like fog inside stone walls. You close your eyes. It's the first time in weeks you feel something like peace. But not everyone is content. Some clergy have fled east, joining whispers of a true Orthodox resistance. Others stay, watching, waiting, recording. Father Arseny, a sharp-eyed monk with a voice like thunder wrapped in wool, keeps a small notebook hidden in the folds of his cassock. He writes constantly, notes, names, incidents. You ask him what it's for. He says, "The gospel of the occupation." You don't ask again. He introduces you to Brother Methody, a scholar monk with ink on every fingertip. Methody claims to have decoded secret symbols in old Russian psalms, predictions of this very occupation. See this verse, he says, pointing at a curling line of Cyrillic. It foretells a short emperor who rides east on a horse of fire. You look at him. He smiles. It's metaphorical. Probably. A young novice approaches one day, holding a small statue he carved himself. It's a figure with Napoleon's hat and Christ's robes. He says, "For the chapel." You gently guide him away. One afternoon, a heated argument breaks out near the vestry. A French officer insists that the monastery hang the emperor's portrait near the relics of Saint Sergius. The abbot says no. The officer demands. The abbot says, in perfect French, "If you put his face here, the icons will cry." The portrait is never hung. But 2 days later, the monastery's wine cellar catches fire. No one is injured. But the smell of burnt grape and wax lingers for weeks. Coincidence, the French say. Divine warning, say the monks. Meanwhile, outside the walls, smaller churches begin to shift. Some priests baptize babies in Napoleon's name, out of fear, not faith. Others quietly switch to Latin rites, claiming, "It's all the same water." But a few resist fiercely. You visit a village where the chapel bell tower has been bricked shut. Inside, the priest refuses to use French calendar dates. Refuses to bless any soldier. Refuses to preach anything but psalms of lamentation. He looks at you and says, "Faith has outlived every crown. It will outlive his too." You nod. And leave. Quickly. One night you find a strange note tucked into your boot at the monastery. It's written on thin parchment, folded 7 times. It reads, "The tongue can bow. The soul kneels to no flag." You burn it. But the words stick. Later, during evening prayers, the choir sings a hymn in a key so low you feel it in your ribs. It's about exile. Return. Forgiveness. You look at the flickering candles and wonder. What happens when an empire conquers the body, but not the spirit? You leave the monastery weeks later. The gates creak shut behind you. A novice makes the sign of the cross. You're not sure if it's for him. Or for you. You're on the road again. But this time, it's not muddy villages or holy chants you're hearing. It's something much worse. Logistics reports. Spreadsheets, on parchment. Ink-stained ledgers. Officers with gray faces and fraying nerves. And the most terrifying phrase a soldier can hear. We're stretched too thin. Because now that Napoleon has conquered Moscow, reorganized the nobility, charmed the clergy, and painted half of Russia in blue-white-red banners. He's got a problem. It's huge. Russia is big. Like keep walking and die of boredom before you reach a border big. And empires? They eat resources. So now you're stationed at a supply hub in Vyazma. It's basically a glorified haystack surrounded by tents and men who all say the same thing. We're out. Out of candles. Out of boots. Out of bandages. Out of flour. Worse, out of horses. You watch a French officer argue with a Polish quartermaster over whether a goat can reasonably pull a cart. The goat, chewing rope in the background, seems confident. The quartermaster less so. Every day, couriers arrive, sweaty, hoarse, covered in snow or dust, depending on the hour, and slap down requests written in 3 different languages. Need 200 blankets in Vladimir. 50 rifles to Kazan. 6 barrels of brandy to somewhere someone can't read. You try to help. You haul crates. You boil snow for water. You tie together torn sacks with your shoelaces. But the truth is, this machine is sputtering. It's not glamorous. Not dramatic. Just slow decay. Historians still argue whether Napoleon realized it in time. Whether he understood that occupying Russia wasn't just a military act, it was a logistical death spiral. And you're at the center of it. You pass a wagon loaded with cheese. At least, it was cheese. Now it's soft, furry, and moving slightly. A soldier pokes it with his bayonet and says, "It's evolving." Another tries to write home using soot on birch bark. Paper ran out 2 weeks ago. And yet, somehow, the Emperor demands updates. You hear he's furious that roads remain impassable during melt season. That post stations are improperly staffed. That Russian scribes keep writing his name with the wrong number of flourishes. You'd laugh, but you're too tired. You march east one morning to check on an outpost and pass a train, not of iron, but of misery. Wagons pulled by exhausted men. Mules collapsing mid-step. Officers arguing over which bundle holds gunpowder and which holds flour. No one knows. Both explode if treated wrong. In a village near Murom, a doctor reports that soldiers are wrapping their feet in cabbage leaves. It's not medicine. It's what they have. One night your fire won't light. You use a broken saddle as fuel. The smell is awful. So is the silence. A corporal murmurs, "This land swallows everything." And he's right. Even the roads seem to vanish behind you. You look back and see only snow, fog, and the occasional fox watching like a judge. You reach a garrison in Nizhny Novgorod where half the men are sick and the other half are eating things that shouldn't be eaten. One is trying to boil his boot. It's not going well. Another guards a barrel of salted fish like it's the crown jewels. You write a fake report. Morale stable. Conditions improving. You don't believe it. But it sounds nice. Then, a new order. Escort a convoy of letters from Moscow back to headquarters in Smolensk. Simple job. Until the 3rd day, when your guide, an old Russian farmer with a smile like a closed door, leads you into a forest and disappears. You spend a night lost in pine darkness, hearing wolves and wondering if the Emperor reads any of the letters you're carrying. By dawn, you stumble into a clearing and find a burned-out watchtower, frost-covered bones, and graffiti on a stone wall. In Russian, someone has scrawled, "You may rule the land, but you'll never feel at home." You don't write that one in your report. Back in Smolensk, the depot commander looks at the cargo you recovered, shakes his head, and says, "Too late. It's all too late." Then he points to a map. Red dots everywhere. Lines drawn. Circles around cities where supply lines have gone dark. You ask, "What's being done?" He shrugs. "We pray the next harvest is generous. Or that the Emperor forgets about us entirely." You leave with new orders. back to Moscow, escorting an ox cart of salt. The cart breaks down halfway there. You and the driver sit on a log and wait for help that never comes. He tells you about his home in Bordeaux, about vineyards, about the warm breeze that never steals your hat. You nod. You can't remember what warmth feels like. The next day, someone steals the ox. You walk back on foot. 70 kilometers. You eat snow and a single, stale biscuit. You arrive in Moscow with blisters and a look that makes the guards let you through without questions. Inside, Napoleon is hosting a party. You hear laughter, music, the clink of glasses. You keep walking. Past the lights. Past the perfume. Past the promise of order. Because all you can see now is the distance between the dream of empire and the slow, cold, crumbling reality beneath it. You wake up to smoke. Not the cozy kind from chimneys and samovars, but the sick, oily scent of burning hay and broken wheels. At first, you think it's a supply depot gone wrong again. Then you hear the shouting, the distant cracking of musket fire, the whinny of horses bolting in panic. And just like that, it started. Not a full rebellion. Not yet. Just sparks. But they're catching. You rush to your post, fumbling with half-laced boots, passing other soldiers scrambling toward the same gray column on the horizon. An officer barks orders in bad Russian. No one listens. The sky turns orange, then black. It's a village. One you passed through weeks ago. You remember the dog with 3 legs, the girl selling garlic braids, the man who stared too long at your boots. Now the roofs are gone. Fire. Ash. Charred fences and a barn collapsed like wet paper. And at the edge of it all, silhouettes. Not Russian troops. Not regulars. Partisans. They slip through forests, strike at night, disappear by dawn. Ragged, half-armed, coordinated just enough. They leave signs you're told to ignore. Twigs crossed under rocks, handprints in ash, roosters drawn upside down in mud. The French call it la fièvre de bois, the fever of the woods. You call it what it is, fear. Historians still argue how organized the resistance truly was. Whether it was the beginning of a nationalist uprising, or just hundreds of small, local revenges burning quietly across a conquered land. But you know one thing, they're getting bolder. You're reassigned again, this time to escort a patrol southeast of Moscow. It's supposed to be routine, count livestock, inspect granaries, remind villagers of their loyalties. It isn't. Your second stop is empty. Doors open. Food gone. Icons removed. Silence. Until a shot rings out from the woods. A soldier beside you drops with a yelp, blood pooling in the snow like spilled ink. You fire back, blindly. No one returns fire. They're already gone. The next village has strung garlic on every gate. You ask why. A boy answers, "To keep you out." He grins. No fear. You march on. Angry now. Exhausted. By the third village, you've stopped asking questions. You just watch for movement in the trees. That night, you camp by the river. A soldier tells a story about a partisan group that burned a bridge in the dead of night, trapping an entire French convoy. The men froze by morning. You ask where it happened. He shrugs. Everywhere. There's a map at headquarters with red pins. They multiply. Fast. A general tries to explain it in a meeting. We control the cities, the roads, the supply chains, but not the forests. A colonel adds, or the people. You nod quietly. Because every time you pass a peasant, you wonder, are you watching for your own survival, or mine? One afternoon, you find a crude trap on the road, a pit dug under a thin mat of branches. Someone scrawled, "Welcome," beside it in French. No one laughs. Another patrol finds a cart filled with firewood. Inside it, hidden beneath the logs, musket balls, homemade grenades, a French flag soaked in urine. Someone is organizing this. Not just rage. Intent. The clergy remains quiet, mostly. But you notice prayers getting longer. Candles burning in secret. Sermons held in barns, not chapels. Some peasants wear small tin medals with the Tsar's initials. Illegal now. But no one's enforcing that law in the fields. One night, a woman offers you bread and soup. You hesitate. She insists. You eat. Then she asks, "Will you still be here when the frost returns?" You don't answer. Because the truth is, no one knows. Supply lines are breaking. Morale is thinning. Snow hasn't fallen yet, but the air is heavy with its promise. And the partisans, well, they're not just peasants anymore. You hear rumors of defected Russian soldiers, even a few disillusioned French ones, joining forest bands. A whisper travels through your unit. There's a leader. No name. Just the Raven. Myth? Probably. But then again, so was resistance. You return to Moscow for rest. Or what passes for it. The city still glows at night, but it feels hollow now. Like theater props left after the actors have gone. French posters cover the walls, but under them you see layers of something older. Torn. Repainted. Waiting. You sleep with your musket loaded. You never used to. At breakfast, someone asks, "Did we win?" You chew your bread. It tastes like ash. Because if this is victory, why are you still flinching at shadows? You've barely shaken the forest mud from your boots when your orders change again. Not back to Moscow, not deeper into the frostbitten countryside, but south. To the edges. The borders. The thresholds. Because while Russia crumbles like wet parchment beneath Napoleon's boot, the empires just beyond its reach are watching closely, quietly calculating what pieces they might pry loose from the wreckage. You travel for days, down past Tambov, skirting the Volga, brushing shoulders with steps that stretch into something less familiar. And then you begin to hear the accents, the languages, the murmured greetings that aren't French or Russian at all. Persian, Turkish, Tatar, Armenian, and something else you can't quite place. Welcome to the south. You arrive in Astrakhan, half fortress, half bazaar, where dust dances with snow and the street food could cure or kill you depending on the day. It's tense here. Because this isn't just a cultural border, it's a geopolitical chessboard where half the players haven't shown their hands yet. You're briefed by a general with a mustache sharp enough to cut meat. He taps the map and mutters, "If the Ottomans move, the whole table flips." And sure enough, there are rumors. Ottoman scouts seen near the Caucasus. Persian riders approaching Russian outposts and leaving no messages. Bokhara sending envoys with silk and questions. Napoleon's empire is impressive, yes. But it's fragile. A sugar sculpture in the rain. And every other power knows it. Historians still debate whether this was the moment the Southern Front nearly erupted. Whether it was diplomacy, fatigue, or dumb luck that kept it from turning into another full-scale war. But you're there. On the ground. Watching. And you see just how thin the veil really is. You're stationed at a checkpoint where French soldiers scan traders' carts for weapons hidden under dates and oranges. You stop a man with a box of saffron so potent it makes your eyes water. He smiles. Says nothing. Another brings rugs. Beautiful, hand-woven, full of colors you've never seen in the north. You're told to inspect them. You find a knife sewn into the hem of one. You pretend not to. Because something tells you, it's not for you. Inside the walls of Astrakhan, French officials hold meetings with Ottoman intermediaries. It's awkward. One side gestures too much, the other not enough. Tea is served. Letters exchanged. But the tension clings to the air like smoke. You walk past a mosque being reconsidered as a military hospital. The Imam protests quietly. He knows there are lines you don't cross in this part of the world. Nearby, an Armenian merchant tells you flatly, "Empires come and go. We keep selling." And he does. Silk, spices, stories. Some probably true. He says the Shah of Persia has sent a gift to Napoleon. You ask what kind. "Poetry," he says. And 1,000 scimitars. You're not sure which cuts deeper. Back at your outpost, your commanding officer frets about desertions. Soldiers vanish in the night. Some head west, trying to find a road home. Others vanish into the mountains, or into tribes willing to feed them in exchange for a musket and some boots. And more whispers. A new rumor that the Tsar, still alive, has sent emissaries to the Khans of the steppe. You picture a ragged envoy, fur cloak fluttering, offering old alliances and older promises. And maybe they're listening. Because the French Empire doesn't look quite so invincible out here. It looks thin. Tired. In one mountain village, you pass a mural freshly painted on a wall. A great eagle facing west, wings frayed, surrounded by smaller birds pecking at its tail. You ask the artist what it means. He smiles. Migration. Elsewhere, a French detachment goes missing. A caravan ambushed. Horses stolen. Tracks vanish into the cliffs. The official report blames rogue bandits. Unofficially, you hear someone mutter, Ottoman test. Because war here would be different. Not lions and drums, whispers and hillsides. The kind that never ends. One night you share a fire with a soldier from Marseille and a merchant from Tbilisi. The soldier drinks too fast. The merchant doesn't drink at all. They argue over who the land belongs to. The merchant says, "To whoever can survive it." The soldier says, "To whoever holds the capital." You stare into the fire and think, what if either is true? What if land, like faith, like language, like empire, is just borrowed? And the South? The South remembers everyone who tried to stay. The Parthians. The Mongols. The Romans. Now the French. You write home that week. Still alive. Still marching. The dust tastes like cloves. The tension tastes like rust. You don't send the letter. You fall asleep with a dagger under your pillow and dreams full of domes and dunes. Because here, on the border of dreams and empire, you've stopped asking whether it can be held. Now you wonder, should it have come this far at all? It starts with silence. No drums. No gunfire. No smoke. Just a suspicious stillness in the air, like the world itself is holding its breath. You're back in Moscow when the first real whispers arrive, not from couriers, not from generals, but from the kitchens. A cook stops chopping onions to murmur. The English fleet has circled north. A washerwoman adds. Linen shipments from the Baltic are delayed. A barber, mid-shave, leans in and whispers into your ear. They say Britain's trade has begun to rot. And for once, it's not gossip. It's strategy. Napoleon's grip over Russia means more than territory. It means control. And now, with the Tsar exiled, supply routes twisted into imperial knots, and friendly, or at least terrified, states stretching from Paris to the Urals, France turns its gaze across the sea. Toward Britain. The ever-hated island. The splinter in Napoleon's side. The last major power still free. And vulnerable. Because while the British Navy still rules the waves, the British economy is slowly drowning. You attend a briefing. A general with a voice like sandpaper says, "The blockade is working. British merchants are desperate. Their goods rot in warehouses. Their ships circle, but no one lets them dock. Our continental system is airtight now." Historians still argue whether the continental blockade, Napoleon's economic war against Britain, ever truly worked. But in this version of events, with Russia under the Emperor's thumb? It's working too well. You read intercepted letters from Hamburg. We've had no sugar in 6 weeks. Wool prices have tripled. Factories are closing. Bankers panic. A British merchant writes, "The only thing flowing freely now is fear." You sip your tea, Russian grown, weak, bitter, and wonder what fear tastes like when it reaches London. But Britain isn't just sitting still. Reports flow in like smoke under doors. Smugglers in the Mediterranean. Dutch ships flying false flags. Portuguese harbors playing dumb. You see a map. Dots. Arrows. Red lines across blue seas. But the sea never obeys maps. Still, the pressure is mounting. Britain is gasping. And you? You're ordered to inspect warehouses along the new eastern trading routes, just to be sure no contraband is slipping through. You visit depots crammed with Persian carpets, Crimean wine, Tatar silks, and strange, salty cheeses that bite back. No British goods. Not one. But something nags at you. Not all shortages are obvious. In one shop, you see a Russian boy cry because his tin soldier broke. The shopkeeper shrugs. No more pewter. No more England. In another, a nobleman complains loudly that the French hats just don't sit right. The British brims were sturdier. Even in luxury, the gap is growing. Back in the Kremlin's outer halls, a French economist presents findings to a very bored general staff. He shows you a graph, drawn by hand curved like a sickle. It predicts a collapse. You see, he says, pointing with a quill, once Britain can no longer export textiles or receive raw cotton, her empire will start to eat itself. He grins. All we have to do is wait. But waiting isn't the French way. Not really. Soon plans are floated, grand ones. Talk of launching ships from Murmansk. Of overland trade corridors stretching from Marseille to Samarkand. Of building a new naval outpost on the Arctic coast. You chuckle. The ice would eat the ships alive. Still, someone drafts the plans. Someone carves the timbers. Someone else writes poetry about it. Meanwhile, Britain lashes back the only way it knows how, covertly. Explosions in Prussian docks. Sabotage in Danish customs houses. A shipment of oranges. That turns out to be gunpowder. One day, a French ship is found drifting near Riga, empty, its crew vanished. The logbook ends mid-sentence. Spotted sails on horizon. Unfamiliar. You think of ghost stories. Pirate whispers. The edge of the world. But it's just war. Back in Moscow, a woman sells British tea from a hidden compartment in her boot. She charges 10 times the price. You buy some. It's stale and perfect. Another man is caught with English books sewn into his mattress. Smuggled Milton. Forbidden Shakespeare. The guards laugh. Then arrest him. You escort him to a cell. He says, "Conquer a country, but never its ghosts." You write that down. In the cafes, the French drink bitter wine and talk about a world without Britain. A global empire with one language, one currency, one ruler. You sip your wine, which tastes like vinegar and bravado. And as the summer fades, something shifts. Not loudly, not obviously, but like a foundation settling. The British blockade is fraying. But so is the empire enforcing it. Because trade isn't just about ships. It's about trust. And trust is bleeding. You stand on a dock in Sevastopol and watch as a French merchant waves a flag no one answers. Behind him, a Russian boy carves a tiny lion into the dock's edge. Not a French eagle. A lion. He whistles a strange tune. Something old. You ask him what it is. He grins and says, "My grandfather heard it from an Englishman." The sea stirs. And suddenly, you're not so sure who's actually winning anymore. You'd think by now, Napoleon might be satisfied. Russia under his thumb. Europe stitched together like a grand imperial quilt. Britain buckling under economic strangulation. But satisfaction is not in his nature. Not now. Not ever. You're summoned to a ceremony in Moscow, yet another one. No one knows what it's for until you see the banners. Celebrating the eternal empire. And suddenly you understand. This isn't a victory lap. It's an audition for immortality. Napoleon isn't ruling anymore. He's writing his legacy in real time. The Kremlin is decked out like a stage set. Velvet drapes. Golden torches. Marble busts of ancient Caesars next to freshly minted statues of Napoleon himself. Slightly taller, slightly more Roman. You can't tell if it's irony or ambition. Maybe both. You're issued a clean uniform for the occasion. It smells like starch and denial. Historians still argue whether this was hubris or pure political strategy. Napoleon declaring not just victory, not just dominance, but a new world order carved in his own silhouette. You stand in the back row of the crowd as he appears. White gloves, black coat, gold trim. His hand, of course, tucked into his chest like he's hiding a deck of cards. He speaks. Not long. Not loud. But with that voice sharp, slow, certain. He calls Russia the Eastern Pillar of the Empire. He speaks of harmony, of unity, of a continent without borders. He promises a dynasty that will outlast memory. And then, the big reveal. He names his infant son, Prince of the North, and declares that Moscow shall become the winter capital of France. Everyone applauds. You do too. It's cold. You want to go home. That night, officers toast over champagne and speculate. One says, "He'll marry a Romanov next, mark my words." Another, "He's going to crown himself Tsar." Cerulean. A third, "He won't stop until we build a road to China." You chuckle. You shouldn't. Because beneath the pageantry, there's movement. You begin noticing more construction. Bridges. Postal stations. Statues being shipped east in pieces. An entire new ministry has been created, the Office of Eurasian Administration. You help unload crates of ink and pens. You wonder who's going to use them. There are rumors of settlements being planned between the Urals and the Caspian. French-style towns, complete with boulevards and cafes. You're sent to inspect one. It's a soggy clearing surrounded by wolves. The town is 4 tents and a chalkboard. Someone has already named it Napoleonsk. You feel the ground shift under your feet, not physically, but symbolically. This isn't conquest anymore. It's colonization. Back in Moscow, fashion shifts again. Now the nobility wear miniature portraits of Napoleon's son pinned to their lapels. Some clergy call him the little son of Europe. You see a pamphlet praising the emperor as the bridge between West and East, the Caesar of the cold. A boy hands you a wooden coin etched with the imperial eagle on one side and a bear on the other. He says, "Double heads. We always win now." You flip it. It lands edge up in the mud. In the salons, philosophers debate whether a man can truly rule from Paris to Perm. Whether a single law code can contain the entire Eurasian landmass. Whether the stars themselves have aligned for eternal empire. A drunk officer murmurs. It's not the stars. It's the wheels of a cannon. Still, no one argues. Napoleon has begun rewriting history while still living inside it. He commissions tapestry showing him standing in front of the Kremlin, bathed in golden light, handing scrolls to grateful peasants. You helped clear the barn they used to film that scene. You found mice in the curtains. At one banquet, you overhear a plan to build a Victory Arch larger than anything in Rome, located midway between Moscow and Paris. Someone asks, "What if it sinks into the mud?" The reply, "Then we'll pave the continent until it doesn't." You walk away. Because everywhere you look, the empire stretches. But like taffy. Like a rope pulled too tight. like something that cannot hold forever. And still, Napoleon dreams. He begins drafting what he calls the Imperial Succession Pact, a rotating capital system, regional governors trained in French academies, a new universal calendar, and a motto, from the Seine to the steppe: one empire, one people. You write it down. Not because you believe it. Because you know someone, someday, will want to remember exactly how it sounded before it cracked. You're sent west with dispatches. Near Minsk, you pass a farmer who's carved an eagle into the trunk of an oak. He says nothing. Just watches you pass. You see another man in a field digging. You ask what for. He says, burying summer. You don't ask again. Back in Moscow, another parade. Another title. Another speech. Napoleon smiles. The people cheer. The snow begins to fall. And far beyond the glow of the torches, far beyond the reach of the empire's paper borders, someone is watching. Waiting. You don't sleep the night before the blizzard. No one does. Because the wind starts howling around midnight, not the ordinary kind, but the kind that sounds too human, too angry. You lie in your cot, wrapped in 3 blankets, listening to the shutters groan like old bones and the roof above your head creak with every gust. And then it comes. Not snow. Not at first. Just cold. A deep, sour, bone-biting cold that slides down your collar and under your fingernails, even though you haven't stepped outside. You breathe, and the air feels sharp. You exhale, and it crackles. When morning finally stumbles in, everything is white. Not a romantic Parisian snow. This is a white that eats color. A white that makes roads vanish, horses stumble, men go quiet. And in the silence, things begin to break. Supply wagons freeze to the ground. Wheels snap. Boots crack open at the seams. Ink freezes in bottles. Muskets jam. Letters stop arriving. Fires won't catch unless fed with entire chairs. You're sent out to help dig out a waypost near Vladimir. You find it half buried, half collapsed, the guards inside stiff with cold, their eyes open, their mouths full of frozen breath. One wrote a message on the wall with charcoal. Send spring. Too late. This was the winter that was supposed to save Russia in the history you knew. The one where Napoleon fails. The one where everything collapses then. But here it comes after the victory. Which is somehow worse. Because now, it's not a punishment for hubris. It's a quiet test of maintenance. A whisper asking, so, can you hold all this? You're stationed in Moscow again. It's quiet. Too quiet. The salons are closed. The theaters are shuttered. Pipes burst. The velvet curtains freeze solid. Even the statues seem to shiver. You walk the streets and see faces peeking through curtains. Not curious, not angry, just waiting. In the Kremlin, they tried to keep spirits up. Dinners are smaller. Music plays more softly. Napoleon hasn't left. He won't leave. But he doesn't smile much anymore. One night, a general asks you, if the empire is eternal, why does it feel like it has the flu? You don't know what to say. Outside, things fray. Partisan attacks increase, not grand, not cinematic. Just sabotage. Rail lines disabled. Salt shipments poisoned. Horses turned loose. And then, a rumor. The Tsar lives. Not just that, he's moving. From the east, from the shadows. Not with an army, but with an idea. A myth. You see his face, on coins, on cloth, carved into fences with nails. Alexander will return, one says. The snow is his breath, says another. The French officials dismiss it. Old wives' tales, they say. Cold makes peasants dream. They laugh. But they tighten security anyway. Napoleon begins staying up late. He writes more letters. They say he's drawing new borders, again. They say he's planning a massive spring campaign, again. They say he still believes this can be held, if only he pushes a little farther. Some officers believe it. Others stare at their maps and see how far they've come, and how far they are from home. You stand guard at a crossroads, watching a fox dart through the snowdrifts, wondering if the empire is really just a pile of paperwork blowing east. And one day it's there, posted on walls, whispered in taverns, scratched onto wooden doors with knives. A symbol, a two-headed eagle rising, and the words, "He is coming." No name, no trumpet, just a presence, a pressure, a pause. You look around and realize everything feels like a breath being held. And history? It doesn't crash. It creaks. You feel it. Right here. Right now. The snow falls more slowly now. The wind has settled into a gentle hush, brushing over rooftops like a lullaby. The lanterns in the city glow a little softer, their light pooling in warm halos against the frostbitten glass. You walk one last time through the quiet streets. No orders, no uniform. Just footsteps crunching lightly over powdered stone. The empire behind you is a distant murmur now, its trumpets muffled, its parchment dreams folded into drawers. Moscow sleeps. And in that sleep, you feel the heaviness lifting. Not completely. Not all at once. But like a great coat sliding from your shoulders. A crow flutters past, a flash of black across the pale. You don't follow it. You watch it go. The bells chime the hour. You don't count them. You just listen. Because tonight, the world feels still. The breath of history is no longer held. It's exhaled. And whatever comes next, thaw, flood, fire, will come later. For now, your eyes grow heavy. The cold doesn't bite anymore. The silence doesn't threaten. It wraps around you like a woolen dream. So rest. The empire, the snow, the myths, they'll still be here in the morning. Sleep, soldier. You've walked far enough for one lifetime. Sweet dreams.